Hey everyone, welcome back to Rising Stronger. For today's episode, I wanted to talk about rising stronger from different types of emotional manipulation or even emotional abuse. Um, yeah, I've heard it come up from time to time in sessions with clients, um, even with different people I know in my personal life. And I always make these podcasts with the hope that my kids and my nieces or nephews may also listen and learn from things to help them navigate their lives. And I think it's really important for everybody to know some of the just the red flags or the signs to look for, because sometimes we see abuse and we think abuse is physical or threats or intimidations, but it can show up manipulations and different things in more subtle ways. And I think it's just good to keep these in mind when you're navigating the dating world. If you're navigating a current relationship. And, obviously, I want to start by saying if there's like threats, intimidation, physical, if there's a physical threat to your safety, I'm gonna talk about how to handle these emotional things, and set boundaries. But if your safety is at threat, get help right away. There's crisis lines that you can call. There's free and confidential, numbers that you could call for domestic violence, domestic abuse. There's hotlines, there's centers you could go to, the police. Never stay when your physical safety is being threatened. So that's first and foremost. Okay, so I wanted to go over the more subtle signs of manipulation. I am going to read a little bit. I got my little notes here so that I don't miss anything important. And then I am a reader sometimes, so I'm going to read a little bit out of a book on how to handle some of the more aggressive communication. So, a couple signs. The first is guilt tripping. And that's when a person makes you feel bad for their problems. They might use a phrase like, after everything I did for you, how could you, like just layering on the guilt for helping you, layering on the guilt for having needs. Blame shifting is another one, and that's when a person doesn't take responsibility for their behaviors, their actions, their choices. They find a way for blaming you. Saying things like, "This is all your fault." I don't know why, but I've been watching this show called The Worst Ex Ever, and I think it's on Netflix. And these are like pretty extreme, physical, verbal, sexual violence. But, a lot of times these people who have done these behaviors, they'll blame and say, well, you made me get this angry. You made me act this way. And I always say, unless you're holding a gun up to somebody's head, making them, you cannot make a person do that. Do not take the bait or blame yourself, because that's just called blame shifting. Because the thing I've learned through the years is we can't control other people. We can't control their actions, their choices, their behaviors. All we have control over is ourselves, our actions, our choices, our behaviors. So when someone says, "Well, you got me so angry," no, don't buy that nonsense. Another form of manipulation is playing the victim, where they ignore you to try to gain control. They use withdrawal as a punishment. If somebody is withdrawing their love or their affection, to punish or manipulate you, like that's icky. Now, there is a difference. I have taught this to my kids, to my clients. Like you've heard me say on here more than once, when we are all in like that heightened state, when we're dysregulated, it's hard for all of us to access like our wise mind. It's hard for us to communicate in a more effective way. So sometimes it is healthy and appropriate to take a break, cool down, and then calmly revisit a topic or something that you're having an argument. So, but that's different than withdrawing. Like that's where you might say to whoever it is, a partner or a family member or friend, like, listen, I recognize that when I'm in this heightened state, I can't communicate as effectively as I'd like to. So moving forward, I may need to just take a break. But I want to come back. I want to talk things through and work things out. If you let them know ahead of time and then you're withdrawing, that's different than purposefully removing yourself without any of that before or afterward repair. And it's done through taking that affection away to hurt a person. The intent is completely different. Um, Another controlling behavior is where you try to control the other person's choices. You tell them what they should or shouldn't be doing. Another sign of manipulation is inconsistent behavior, where there's a lot of hot and cold back and forth. And it just keeps you like kind of having to walk on eggshells and tiptoe around because you never know what version you may or may not get from a person. Now, everybody is a human being. Everybody in this world has a bad day sometimes. We have stressors, we have things going on. No one's going to be perfect all the time, but if you're consistently inconsistent, there's a problem. Gaslighting. That's scary. That's when a person really does things to make you question yourself, question your reality. They deny the things that they may have said or things that they have done. Like, for an example, they might be like, I never said that. You're being paranoid. Or like if a person brings up something like a concern, they'll twist it and make up stories and blame you again, go into that blame shifting of you're just being ridiculous. Like, yeah. The silent treatment, that's sort of like similar to what I was saying with like that withdrawal behavior. Again, it's like that ignoring to gain control. Love bombing. This you might hear this term in relation to narcissism. It's where in the beginning of the relationship, there it's almost like an overwhelming amount of affection. They're like so seemingly so loving, so attentive. They love bomb you with gifts and actions and this and like so much, but then they suddenly pull away. It's like they go from one extreme of love and to withdrawal, with the intent of being manipulative. It's like they hook you in and then show you the other side. Twisting words. Some of these kind of overlap, like the gaslighting, the twisting of words, but they change what you've said. They take things out of context. Also, there's intimidation, where this one can feel very scary because that's when they might use fear or tone to intimidate, or even their physical presence to try to intimidate you. And the intent behind that is to try to make you feel uneasy or pressured into actions or behaviors. Another one is making you doubt yourself. just purposefully trying to lower your confidence, make you second guess everything and everyone. An example of this would be like your friends don't really care about you like I do. Um, there's more. There's, emotional withdrawal kind of ties into some of the other ones, but it's where they're being physically present, but they're emotionally unavailable. Stonewalling, that's where you're refusing to discuss problems or resolve conflict. Now, again, when you're in that heightened state, you might need a break, but the intent is to come back and revisit it. Doing the repair work. Stonewalling is just like, I'm not touching that. I'm not going there. I refuse to talk about this, period. And nothing gets resolved. Ignoring your feelings, changing the subject, dismissing your concerns when you bring something up. Passive aggressive behavior, like I like to joke and be silly sometimes. And like sometimes it's okay to like make light of a situation, but passive aggressiveness, again, the intent behind it is icky. Um, that's where you're not joking, but there's like an element of sarcasm. There's the eye rolling. You bring something up and there's like that's a completely different intent and energy to look out for. Withholding information, that's a biggie. Sometimes people will just leave out really important details that a person needs to know. They may omit parts or all of the story. That's lying, that's manipulation. It's basically keeping you in the dark to try to maintain control. Chronically invalidating a person, where you're minimizing your emotions, minimizing your experiences, creating emotional distance and just shutting a person down whenever vulnerability appears. And then lastly, there's the punishing vulnerability, where this is to me one of the worst ones too, because it's like when a person, we've talked a lot about like sharing, being open, being vulnerable, sharing our shame. When somebody takes something that they know is a shameful or what's the word that I heard someone say recently? A tender part of you or your story, if they use that against you later, all of these signs, get out. If you're early on in a dating relationship, because these are signs of very unhealthy patterns. It's not your job to try to change a person or fix them or love them into treating you better. Get out, see the red flags. But there's times where it might not be a dating relationship. It might be, oh, this is a relative. This is a person I'm stuck working with. It might be a situation where you can't necessarily get out. So I wanted to talk about ways that you can handle this kind of disrespect or manipulation. So I'm going to read a little bit from, it's called Eating in the Light of the Moon, by Anita Johnston. And I think I've shared a little bit about her assertiveness technique before, where it's like she calls it most of you have heard of this. It's like the formula. When you blank, I feel blank because it gives me the impression that blank. So for example, when you talk to me like that, I feel angry because it gives me the impression that you don't care about me. Or when you look at me that way, I feel frustrated because I get the idea that you don't trust me. And, she was saying when you're being assertive, it's best to keep it short, stick to the formula. That way, your message is loud and clear. However, the thing I love about this book is she talks about how to use this formula when you're working with like more aggressive behavior or more manipulative behavior. So I'm going to just read this. It says, the second assertiveness technique that I recommend learning is one that builds upon the first. When a person uses the formula and asserts their feelings, others can respond aggressively by attacking or blaming them for creating conflict. This technique for responding to aggressive behavior is called deflection because it helps to turn away verbal attacks, accusations, and put downs. It is a way of sidestepping destructive arguments over who's right and who's wrong, which usually leads nowhere. When someone tells you, oh, you're just too sensitive, or it's stupid to feel that way, or simply you're wrong, it's important that you not act as though you have to defend yourself. Instead, sidestep the accusation with a comment like, that may be so, because when you say that, you're neither agreeing nor disagreeing with them. But this is how I feel. Or I realize that this is your perspective, but I see things differently. I can appreciate your point of view, but I want you to know how your behavior affects me. I have seen this dance where someone's like, yeah, oh, you're being too sensitive. You're wrong. It's your fault. Again, like you're doing this. And I've watched the dance where the other person feels like they have to defend themselves and prove that they're not wrong and just watch them go down the rabbit trail. But when we're in it ourselves, sometimes we miss the stuff that an outsider might obviously see, and we can go down that path. But with this formula, you save so much time and wasted energy, and really you're staying focused on your point. And it's like, okay, we don't see, agree to disagree. That's your perspective, but this is how I feel. I see things differently. And it says, when you use this technique, you will be amazed at how easily you can stay focused on how you feel, what you want, and what you don't want. You will feel the strength that comes from within, the power of dominion, when you honor your feelings as well as those of others. You are asserting that you can have a difference in perspective without having to end the relationship or abandon your thoughts and feelings. The third technique is one that follows deflection, and it's called the broken record because it involves repeating yourself over and over when you're communicating your feelings and the other person responds with an attack. Instead of getting sidetracked with the issue on how well you are or aren't handling your issue, your first response could be to deflect by saying, that may be so, and then restate your feelings. But I want you to know that when you tell me that I should or shouldn't do this, I feel angry. If the person says something like, gee, aren't we being a little touchy? You deflect by saying, maybe, but I want you to know that when you tell me what I should or shouldn't do, I feel angry. They might then say, oh, I think you're really overreacting. You can respond once again with, it may seem that way to you, but I want you to know that when you tell me what I should or shouldn't do, I get angry. Notice how like they keep that other person keeps poking, 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 but the person stays short, clear, to the point. They're not abandoning themselves. They're not abandoning their point. They're just staying focused and clear. And then these I did not come up with. I'm just going to read them. But I've shared some of these on my work page before. But it talks about other smart responses to shut down disrespect. Number one, they said, I've noticed that you've interrupted me 3 times now. Number two, I'd like to understand what you meant by that. Number three, let's reset and discuss this either when we've cooled down and can talk respectfully, or maybe we need to get a professional involved to discuss this. Number five, they say, we both know that that's not what happened. But again, sometimes these manipulators will just keep trying to push and fight And then you could use that broken record. Number six, I'm skipping some, so there. I've considered your view. Here's mine. And then another one that doesn't align with our values. Another one, I'm confident in my expertise on this matter. I like this next one. Interesting take. Here are my facts. Um, Number 10, it says we can disagree without being dismissive. Um, Another one says let's pause here and reset expectations. And now another one I like, I've heard you out. Now please hear me. This one too. That's not an accurate reflection of my, whatever it may be, work, my point. And then also, yeah, my boundaries on this are non-negotiable. Again, you're still being respectful, but you're also not being taken advantage of. And then this one talks about 9 boundaries for people who gaslight you. Let's move on. We have a different view on what's happened. If you continue to speak to me this way, I'm not engaging. We remember things differently. I won't argue with you about something that I know I experienced. This conversation is over if you continue to twist my words. Or you could just say, I need a break from this discussion. I will not discuss this with you any further today. I'm open to talking about this when we can do so respectfully. My feelings and experiences are valid, and I need you to respect that. All of these are clear, direct, respectful, but I'm not taking BS. And that's important, you know. You've heard my favorite quote, kind and loving, but boundary like a mother effer. Um, so anyway, I hope this helps. Just A, if you're questioning how you're being treated, if you're not sure what's manipulation, what's abuse, or if you or someone you know is in a relationship where there's these types of manipulations or emotional abusive things going on, I hope this helps to hear what it is, and also gives you some guidance on and tools on how to manage that. And again, whether it's physical, absolutely get help and support. But even with this emotional stuff, if you're in a relationship where this stuff is going on, get a professional involved that specializes in, there's people that specialize in like narcissism, in like I teach assertiveness and healthy communication and boundaries. Find somebody who can really help you uh, work together to create a healthier relationship or help you to create safety and boundaries outside of the relationship. Or even just boundaries around, again, some of these people might be relatives that you're not able to necessarily leave, but they might talk about like how frequently to step in or out of that relationship. They might talk about sometimes people do end really toxic relationships, even if it is a family member, or they may help teach you what's called gray rocking, which is sometimes tied to narcissism as well, but it's how to just like stay engaged, but on the most surface basic level so that you can't be manipulated anymore. Um, so anyway, I hope this helps somebody. Please share it if there's anyone that you know could benefit from it. And of course, rating and reviewing and sharing. That's how my podcast keeps going. So I would appreciate that. And I hope you have a great day. Take care.